Hello, my thought roomies. What is up, friends? I'm your host, Hallie Rose. If you're new to the show, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. Today on the show, I have a dear friend of mine, Alex Nelson. Alex is one of the kindest human beings I've ever met. He has such a contagious smile and a very strong, safe presence. He's one of those people that invites intimacy and curiosity and depth of sharing. And I think that you'll find that in this episode. And very true to character, the moment that Alex walked in for this interview with me, he found himself holding space for me and a process that I was going through. And it is so valuable to have friends in your life who can be there to witness you in your journey. Friends, family, maybe it's a beloved partner. Because I really believe that we did not come here to do this thing alone. And by this thing, I mean life. So I really hope that you enjoy this conversation with my friend Alex today. And let it be a reminder to you that whatever you're feeling, whatever you're going through, whatever you're processing right now in your life, you deserve to be witnessed in that. It is worth sharing. There's somebody out there that will hear you, and you are so deserving of taking up that space. I hope that you find this episode healing. I hope that you learn a couple of things about responsible psychedelic use as well, and how to overcome challenges in your life, how to get to know yourself more deeply and intimately. So without further ado, please join myself and host of the brilliant podcast Through the Veil, Alex Nelson. Alex Nelson, welcome to the Thought Room.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
This is so long overdue. You've had me on your show twice already, and I'm just such a stickler for doing it in person that, it's taken us this long to get you on, but I'm so happy that you're here in Austin, Texas with me doing this podcast right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so fun to be here and happy to finally be doing it.
You've been here. It's funny. So you came here like an hour and a half ago when we were supposed to start recording. And pretty much the moment that you walked into the kitchen, I burst into tears of overwhelm, sharing my resistance and my own dance with what being a human is right now. And it's just so perfect that you're here. And this is such a great segue into all of what we're probably going to talk about today, because you are just such a master at holding space. And the moment I got a little choked up in the kitchen about how much is going on and how hard I'm trying to work, and you saw that in me, your actual body language, like you moved closer. Like I watched you flower open to the experience of holding what my pain was in that moment. And that is so gorgeous, because so often in life, we witness another going through pain and it triggers our own pain and our own fear. And so we contract away, or we try and fix, instead of just being that gentle container to hold whatever the suffering is and allow it to flow out and flush out on its own. So I just wanted to name that right off the bat as one of your absolute gifts. And this will segue into my question about what you do Alex Nelson. Who are you?
It's a good question. And yeah, it's so interesting. I think people resist holding space and get into that fixing space because it's the fastest route out of an uncomfortability they might be feeling themselves. So it takes a little practice, but everyone's capable of that. Just being present for someone who's going through something and actually allowing them to express fully. So what do I do? Who am I? These are really, really good questions I ask myself sometimes.
I like to ask super easy questions on my podcast, casual answers.
What's the nature of your being?
Right. Who is the essence of you? And go.
And start. So I do a few different things. I'm a life coach. That's probably my primary profession. I also facilitate various different plant medicine experiences and work with people in that capacity and run a podcast as well called Through the Veil, which you've been on. And really all of those things are different ways, different modalities of me aiming at what I think is my purpose here, which is helping people heal themselves from their trauma, from difficulties they're going through, and helping them to become the nodes of light that they are here to be, and as such allowing a ripple to go through society at large and cause us to all wake the fuck up, hopefully. And of course, the primary piece of that ongoing mission is me working upon myself to make sure that I am being the clearest container I can be. So just like earlier this afternoon, that I can be present with someone who's going through something and not feel my own things that have been unresolved bubbling up immediately and needing to work through that, and rather just allowing that space to hold. So in short, what I do is I help people heal themselves. I help create containers in which people can do healing work, feel safe enough to do healing work. And I try to work on myself so that I can be as clean of a container as possible. Amen.
Amen. That is absolutely the work. I'm thinking about, again, going back to what happened in the kitchen. How does one train themselves to deepen their capacity to hold space?
That's a really good question. I think primary is working upon yourself.
What does that look like when you say working upon yourself?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I think it's becoming aware of all the different parts of yourself, because we can't work on anything if we're not aware of it. So it's not just this nebulous, you got to work on yourself. It's like, first, become aware. So this can be as simple as listing out the behaviors that you do, good and bad. I work out every day. Awesome. And also, every morning I'm on my phone for 2 hours before I start the day. And just looking at that list objectively, it's just something I've done a few times for myself, and going, what does this amalgamation of behaviors say about me as a person? Oh, I spent 2 hours on my phone. Perhaps that indicates I'm not excited and jazzed up to start my day. And I actually want to begin in this sort of avoidance mode, because I'm just like, oh, God, I know I have to go to that job I hate. I know I have to go see those people I don't love, whatever it may be. So in that listing, you start to become aware of how you are existing, because oftentimes it's easy to get lost in the sauce as you're in your day.
Right.
And you're not seeing your total list of behaviors kind of.
You're choosing, what I'm hearing is you're choosing to become a conscious creator of the experience instead of just being asleep. And we could call it good or bad, but that's, again, that's pretty polar. It's just, these are the activities I'm pouring my energy into. Is it serving what my big why is?
Yeah.
Yes or no?
Exactly. Yeah. And for a lot of people,
habits.
A lot of people even just receiving this, a question I hear very often is like, well, I don't know my big why. And this process of deepening your awareness of yourself is also the process of uncovering what you're here for. So as you do this type of work to become more familiar with your inner landscape, you will simultaneously become more familiar with the pieces of yourself that are naturally predisposed towards a certain profession or a certain skill that you really enjoy. So as you do this, you can kind of start to orient yourself towards what you're here for. And that's a piece of the holding space, I think, is people who are very clear in their purpose and their mission and what they're here for they're not grasping at needing to look or perform a certain way for someone. And you can feel that when someone's speaking to you, when they are unclear on what they want. So they're trying to make you like them. Please like me, because that's my metric for am I a successful human or not. So you get to remove that mask, and in the clarity of knowing what you're here for, you're able to actually be empty of projected expectation. And that is the spot in which like good space holding can begin to happen.
So what about the people who are listening to this and feel like they've been floundering around to find their purpose and find out how they're going to serve? And in trying so hard to find their purpose, they have ground themselves into a place of feeling absolutely trapped and forlorn. How does one get freed from that absolute labyrinth?
Yeah. I love that question, because that is like, it's the most difficult spot emotionally to be in. It's a spot of non-clarity and a spot of sort of emotional roller coasters where you don't know how you're going to feel the next moment, because there's no like sharpened sword that's pointing at what you're supposed to be doing. So the metaphor I like to focus on when we're talking about your purpose is that of an archaeologist. And an archaeologist isn't just like, oh, I dug up a whole skeleton all at once. It's, oh, I dust off a little bit of this bone over here. Maybe that's, I'm really good at painting. And then I dust off this bone over here, which is I really love music. And eventually the whole picture starts to reveal. And finding your purpose is really much more like that than it is like discovering something all at once. And the permission that metaphor gives is that starting small is okay. You may just find only the pinky toe bone of the dinosaur skeleton of who you're supposed to be, but that's a beautiful spot to start. So giving yourself that permission to not feel like you need to do it all at once, and it doesn't need to come out as a completed picture. It can come out just as, okay, everything in my life is pretty fucked up right now. Like COVID's happening. So just like I lost my job. But maybe I just discover that I really love painting for 5 minutes a day. Cool. That's your inroad. That's the first piece. And then 5 years from now, you look back and you go, oh, wow, when I discovered I love painting, that gave me a little passion back into my life. That passion allowed me to explore thing number 2, which was meditation. And that opened another door.
Right. And to go into that even more deeply, it's like, I feel that needing to find a purpose in a way is the small self trying to exert control, right? Because if you just knew what the end goal was, then it would be okay. And what I hear you saying, and this is something I work on with my clients, it's like delighting in what's right here, because you might love this thing and then next week you don't love that thing. And that's okay, because you've iterated beyond that. And can you let go of control of that too? Do you need to keep yourself in something because it was feeling good last week and now it's not? Like, who made that rule? Right. You know, and I know that you want to move the needle towards something and build something that's substantial. I get that. So just acknowledge that desire within yourself without needing it to look a certain way, right? Yeah, it's so tricky, this process of finding our purpose. But you know, and I want to share this too, because my process of finding my purpose has been so nonlinear. And, you know, I went from doing a psychology degree to freaking out when I was finishing that, not knowing what I wanted to do. So I went right into a second degree in education and then graduated, needed to make some money, became a teacher, did that for 3 years, moved to New York, became a nanny for celebrities, did that for a few years, started my own company. And when they ask you in high school, what do you want to be when you grow up? like, I remember just feeling like, I don't know. I had this sense of what I want to do, I don't think exists. And that's what's happening for so many people. The reason it's hard for you to know what your niche is because like your niche is just, it's expanding and developing itself in the same way that human consciousness is for the collective right now. You know, we didn't have influencers even 10, 15 years. What was that? It's a made up thing. It's a new thing. And so many things that we're needing now, men's work, you know, psychedelic integration, like these are new blossoming things. So the invitation is to just let go of the reins of control, I think, and let the story paint itself.
Yeah. And so much more powerful to look at what the themes are that tie together all the different things that we are capable of or that we do. Because when we're attached to a specific job title, like I want to be a doctor, or doctor's probably a bad example. Those will probably be around for quite a while. But, you know, I want to be a market analyst. We get attached into that as if it'll be permanent and as if that will be a position that's around forever and something that we're doing forever. But what you can start to uncover in yourself is the different features of your individual psyche that make you good at something like that or make you enjoy it. So maybe you have a really, really keen attention to detail, and what you love is working with data. Beautiful. That's an amazing starting point. And that opens up a much broader spectrum of things that you could be doing with your life that will allow you to find that specific thing that just like lights up every piece of your neurology rather than becoming like, oh, well, all I do is marketing analysis. It's, oh, okay, I am composed of these 5 different psychological features that allow me to do this well. But also, man, there's 20 other things that could apply to.
Totally. And, you know, this is all making me think of, I started re-listening to this audiobook that I love so much. I've talked about it on this podcast before. It's one of my favorite morning entrainments. So it's something that I'll play for 5 minutes while I'm brushing my teeth just to get my mindset prepped for the day. And it's called Money and the Law of Attraction. It's one of the Esther and Jerry Abraham Hicks teachings. And there's this one and they use humor, which I love. People, spiritual teachers that use humor. It's, for me, it's such a portal for these lessons to come through. And at one point in the channeling, they're talking about selecting a job, selecting a career. And Abraham is saying, so you mean to tell me that in your society, it is a good thing to select the one thing that you're going to do every day for the rest of your life and stick with it. And that's what society praises, right? And when you zoom out and just think about that pragmatically, you go, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. It's not with the way the world's changing and the way my consciousness is expanding. I'm not the same person I was yesterday. And so to say I'm going to do this one thing for 50 years is just not realistic.
Especially at 18.
It doesn't leave any room, you know, to fall down, to get back up, to be in the juiciness of the unknown and to dabble and to get this full, rich experience of this life.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, it's absolutely bonkers to me that we choose that profession. You start the wheels in motion when you're like, really like 16 in the US, because you start getting asked, like, what are you going to do for a living? You got to start preparing for college. Once you go to college, then you're on the track and okay, now well, you're $200,000 in debt from your college that you couldn't pay for in the first place. And now you have to do that profession because it's the only thing that'll make you money to pay off the loans. And all of a sudden you're falling downhill the whole way to the end of your life because of a decision you made when you had no idea who you were. And that's an extraordinarily terrifying thing and brings a lot of problems for the way we operate as a society, because there's so many people who are working jobs that are air quotes important who are deeply unhappy because they chose something that was never for them based off of society's paradigm of what they're supposed to be doing.
What do we do if we feel stuck right now? Like someone is listening to this going, Alex is talking about my life and I have responsibilities. I can't just up and leave, right? These are the stories. I have mouths to feed. I have my wife, and I wouldn't be good if I did that. What do you say to these people who have bills or finances or responsibilities that want to break free and go into a new paradigm, but don't know how?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say the first thing, we'll go real tactical, and then we'll go a little more like spiritual, emotional side of it. So on a tactical level, you need to free yourselves of whatever chains are binding you. So if you have college debt, if you have credit card debt, whatever it may be, you need to first work on just clearing that out, because until that's cleared, you're going to be kind of chained to it. And it's going to be really hard to free your mindset, because most people, it's like a balance of reality and what they would like to be true. So the reality is, if you have $40,000 of credit card debt, you probably can't just jump ship and not work for 10 months. It just logistically won't work, especially if you have kids or a partner. So that's the like tactical side, is just like buckle down, clear out what may be holding you back, what has its hooks in you. Then the spiritual emotional side, it again, reflecting back to awareness. You can, no matter what job you're doing, no matter who you are, what your circumstances are, you can commit to taking 5 or 10 minutes a day to starting to broaden your awareness of who you think you perhaps want to aim at becoming. And I say aim at becoming because you can then start to put the wheels in motion to become that person. It won't be an immediate process, but you will start to feel better based off of taking steps along that process. And your inner self or your highest self will start to give you a feedback loop of, oh, I feel good because I know I'm on the path.
This is such fantastic advice. And I want to go into this a little bit more because, again, this is something I work on with my clients. But what I find with a lot of people is we talk about visualization, how powerful visualization is. And they've done a lot of studies about the power of visualizing and how it moves our energy in very palpably, tangible, scientifically measurable ways. And yet, and if anyone's into the work of Joe Dispenza, they'll know this, visualization on its own is not as powerful unless it is paired with strong emotion, right? So this is how we move into the space of manifesting, pairing positive visualization and the directionality of how we want to future cast our lives, and pairing it with the embodiment of strong emotion. Now, in my opinion, and what I've seen with my clients, is a lot of people get stuck here because they are afraid of feeling the good feelings.
Yeah.
I know that sounds strange, not to you, but to some listening, what? We block ourselves off from gratitude, from joy, from really thinking about the feeling that we'll have when we find our soulmate and they're running their fingers down our cheek, and how delicious and wonderful that's going to feel. We don't want to feel that right now because it reminds us that we don't have that, right? So then we go into that lack space, and that's painful. And so we don't want to risk that. So instead we just cut ourselves off from all feeling. And it's what you and I were talking about before we recorded. Yeah. It's that apathy space. It's just more comfortable to stay in that little gray zone because the extremes hurt. So to become aware of that, I think, and to harness that power of once you undress the fear, oh, I don't want to let myself feel joy because I'm worried that joy will leave me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's attachment. Can I allow the experience of this joy without needing to cling to it or anchor it or have it last a certain amount of time? Can I just taste this the way that I would a delicious ice cream cone and let that be it until the next one, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for most people listening, maybe not most, some people listening, there's a process that's incumbent upon becoming truly effective in your life. And a part of that process, the metaphor that's coming to me, or the visual image, is like if you're a hot air balloon, There's some people that have 500 sandbags tied all around every corner of their hot air balloon, and also the air balloon's not full of air, and just like sitting on the ground wondering, why am I not flying? So if you're not getting some of the results in your life, and the thing that literally anyone can do no matter where you are is you can start to address the pieces from your past that are continually unconsciously or subconsciously informing all of your behavior and your mindset, because you can have the perfect habits and you can have the perfect processes that you do every day. But if you have 10 unprocessed capital T traumas from your past, you are going to have a lot of difficulty moving towards what your true objective is, because you have a faulty roadmap of how reality is. And you have to first go back and correct the map before you can move forward.
I love this, and I want to definitely go more into trauma. And specifically, in a minute, I'll get you to talk about capital T trauma and little t trauma, just for anyone who doesn't really know what that means. I also want you to speak to people who, like me, a couple years ago, someone would have asked me, do you have any trauma? I'd be like, no. I mean, no, I had a good childhood. I had a good life. Yeah, I mean, things were hard. We moved, blah, blah, blah. Had no idea what was really going on in the basement levels of Hallie until ayahuasca. But so I want you to speak to that. It's like, what if people are listening to this going like, I'm unhappy, but I don't think I have any traumas.
Yeah. So here's the way I look at it. If you know that the things you're doing right now are not serving you, but you are not able to break yourself of those things, there is a high likelihood that there are unprocessed traumas in your past. And why I find that to be true is because you have these subconscious processes that are informing the way you are going through life in sort of pain avoidance mode, where every little source of discomfort to your psyche feels like it could be a reopening of this giant pain you felt at one point. And you have all of these adaptations that you've made. So you can think of obvious examples like an addiction, like addiction to alcohol. That was my case. And the reason I had that addiction was because that was at the time a really good way to cope with trauma. But very quickly it became a maladaptive strategy. But every time I would run into something that perhaps triggered some piece of trauma in me, that was the strategy I knew how to use. So if you're making choices that you know don't serve you over and over again, this isn't just like a one-off, like, okay, I had pizza last Saturday. That's fine. It's not like you're a bad person. But if you're having pizza every day, why are you doing that? If you're conscious of the fact that you want to be doing something different, but there's a disconnect between the action you know you want to take and the action that you are consistently taking. And this is part of why, back to the top of just recording those behaviors so that you can see objectively, like, okay, our psyche's this amazing storytelling machine, and I'm good at this. I know you're good at it, where we can tell ourselves post hoc stories about why we did something. Oh, well, I deserved that because I'm good and da-da-da-da-da. But when you look at something objectively on the paper and you go, wow, that is what I've done the last 10 days. And even if one of those days I can justify my behavior, I can't justify it the other 9. It really forces yourself to become aware. And as you start to ignite that bonfire of awareness, to then start to investigate, okay, it's like simple inner questions. You don't need to go straight plant medicine route off the top. You can just start to ask, why do I do that behavior? And just sit with that and go, why do I do that thing? What age, perhaps, did I pick up that habit? When did that start? Can I remember anything around why I started doing that? Maybe I started smoking when I was 22. Can I remember why I started smoking? What else was going on in my life at that point? Was there a really rough breakup that happened there? And I just kept this on board because I never really processed that fully? What's trapped within me that's waiting to surface so it can be processed?
And my other favorite question, what am I unwilling to feel? So what am I unwilling to feel that this behavior allows me not to feel?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so much I want to talk about off of this. One, if you can go back into like talking about big T, little t, I do want to touch on that. And then would love to hear more about your dance with alcohol and what you were doing with your life at the time, and perhaps how that cascaded into what you've now dedicated your life to.
Yeah. So capital T trauma versus little t trauma. I think I have a perspective on this that is maybe not exactly what one would expect from it. So I think when someone hears capital T, little t trauma, you would think like, okay, it's the difference between, capital T might be being abused as a child severely, and little t trauma might be your friends didn't invite you to their birthday party. That's the way I think most people would think of it. But how I perceive it is in the magnitude of its effect upon your actions. And I'm also aware of what seems to be the case, which is 10 little t traumas can certainly build up and become a capital T trauma. So while your friends leaving you out in one particular instance might not be this huge negative thing, if it happens 22 times from the age of 10 to the age of 16, you really quickly pattern this internal unworthiness, or I'm not included, or people don't love me. So the reason it's useful to have a distinction, because I think a lot of people get themselves caught up in, well, my childhood wasn't so bad. As you even said earlier, like I can't think of any one big specific thing that just like absolutely ruined my childhood. It can be this combination of 30 things that happened over the course of a 1-year span. And those things can really pattern a behavior that we carry forward in our life unconsciously. And to not be dismissive of that, you're so impressionable when you're young. And even as you're growing older, sometimes we're walking on our path and a really strong wind knocks us off the path. And we don't even notice that we've been knocked off the path. So we just keep walking full speed in this new direction that the wind of whatever it was that happened, a really bad breakup, a severe death in the family, an abusive incident, whatever it is, we don't even notice that it knocked us off path. And we're walking in the wrong direction all of a sudden, and we aren't aware of that. So the distinction there is just like the magnitude of effects. Like, so in an extreme magnitude of effect, it could be something like you're unwilling to feel emotions at any point in your day at all. And you're doing coping behaviors from the time you wake up until the time you go to sleep. That, whatever is causing that, whatever's precipitating that, I would call a capital T trauma, because it has an extreme effect, an almost PTSD-like effect upon your day-to-day existence. A little t trauma might just be something that's connected to a specific behavior. So maybe you really have trouble going to the gym and everything else in your life is actually pretty good and you're feeling most of your emotions, but you just don't want to go to the gym because, when you were 17, some idiot guy told you that you look stupid in yoga pants and like that really fucked you up in a way. But, in terms of magnitude of effect, it's not spilling over into every other area of your life. So that's like the distinction there. Talking about my working through alcoholism, to name it for what it was, from essentially the age of 16 through the age of 22 was when I finally quit. That was a coping behavior for a multitude of things. At the core of it was a feeling of not being worthy of love and a feeling that I wasn't loved. So my parents fought a lot when I was younger, and that really patterned in some behavior of just like relationships can't work. What am I aiming at anyways? If things won't go well, even if I'm perfect, things could be bad. And then like a really, really brutal breakup where I got cheated on when I was 16. It's not that uncommon of a story for a young high schooler, but we underestimate how much those things inform our opinions of ourselves. And so I had this, and what I adopted was the coping mechanism of alcohol allowed me to forget that I thought I wasn't funny and charming and worthy of love, and allowed me to step into an alter ego that was those things. And so very quickly, because that round peg very clearly fit the round hole that was left in my heart and in my soul, I adopted that full tilt because, every time I'm at a party and I'm kind of drunk, I can be funny, I can be charming, I can be getting the cute girls, I can know where the good parties are. Guys are telling me I'm awesome. I'm fucking nailing it. But all I'm doing is covering over what is still a well that has a hole in the bottom of the well, and no matter how much water I pour in there, it's never going to fill up. And as the behavior became more maladaptive, it really takes, especially for people that are younger, when you're in college or something, it's easy to justify drinking 4 or 5 nights a week because everyone's doing it, or so it seems. I really had to get to a point where I lost a job where I was the manager. I was 20, and I was the manager of this offsite location for a dog food company. So I was for no college degree, I was fucking killing it. I was working a job that was way above my experience level. I was getting paid well. I was doing quite well, but I kept missing days because I'd be hungover because I wanted to party more. And that was a bit of a wake-up call for me. I was like, holy shit, okay, what path am I on right now? Where is my life aimed? Because I just fucked up an objectively good thing at that point in my life. In the awareness of that, I had just the thought, okay, I need to quit drinking. That was the first inroad, but I tried, didn't work. Tried cold turkey, didn't work. I was kind of should I do AA? That didn't really feel right to me. I heard Tim Ferriss, super early episode of his podcast, and just a throwaway line. I tried mushrooms and it really helped with my depression. It's interesting. I'd taken mushrooms once when I was 16. Didn't really have, a good or a bad experience. It was okay, that's interesting. I wonder if there's a different way to use these. So put myself into seeker mode, found them after a month of trying because my network was optimized for I could probably find coke, no problem. Mm-hmm. But finding a psychedelic was super fucking difficult. Finally found them. Went in, did a large internal journey on my own, which I don't recommend. We'll probably talk a little bit about safety as well, but had this transformative experience of every molecule of my being dissolving out into the universe and every single iota of my being completely surrounded by unconditional love. And just feeling that on a DNA level soaking into me, which in that moment was everything I needed when I had so little self-love. When I constructed this whole cardboard version of Alex that was funny and charming and knew all the good stuff, that was able to fall away. And I was able to just be as I was and be received and be loved both by myself and also by the universe around me, or so it felt. So that experience, and then 2 more ceremonies after that, over the course of about 3 months, one in which I essentially went through every way I had ever hurt anyone that I loved, whether that was just through lying to them, stealing money from my dad, just all the fucked up behaviors that you do when you're deep in a trauma coping pattern, because any price is high enough to pay to not face the pain. It basically dragged me through every piece of that. I was here's where you fucked up. Here's where you fucked up. Look at this, look at this, look at this, which was necessary because I had to pay true repentance for things I had done to also move forward. It's not just okay, cool, I love myself now, so all right, back to on the up and up. It's I have to pay repentance for this. That's the pain that people are normally avoiding once they're deep in that cycle. And then the third experience was just seeing the mountain of my potential in front of me and being, wow, oh my God, look at that. It goes up into the cloud. I can't even see the end of it. And just standing with this sense of awe, and then looking around me and being oh, I'm at the bottom of the fucking mountain right now. I have to climb this whole thing, and just having this vision of oh, every time I betray myself by going and getting super hammered, I'm taking a sled right back to the bottom of the mountain again. So no matter how much climbing I do, if I continue to do behaviors that I know are aimed at my highest good, and I do them unconsciously, I'm putting myself back to the starting line. And that's not a way I wanted to live my life. So after those experiences, I quit drinking for a whole year, just cold turkey, didn't touch alcohol. And I've since reforged a 98% healthy relationship with alcohol, in terms of I can have a glass of wine with dinner tonight if it called to me, and just be good with that. Or I can consciously choose, this year, my birthday, which was a few days ago, didn't get to have some big party attached to it because of the state of locking down. But in previous years, just consciously choosing, like, it's my birthday. So I'm picking a month in advance. I'm going to go have a fun party with my friends. We're going to get pretty drunk. Maybe I'll take some MDMA. Who fucking knows? Let's see. But it's consciously then choosing it rather than a response where I'm running away from a pain.
I love what you said about this idea of, betraying ourselves. And I was talking about this with our dear friend, Eric Godsey, in conversation and, through some comments I left on some pieces of writing on his Instagram the other week, which is this idea for me that I've been thinking about a lot is that when we get away with a lie to another, we don't win. We don't win even if they never find out that there was a little white lie, or we weren't in truth, or we withheld something small because we didn't want to hurt them, right? We were protecting them, right? This is how we justify it. We don't win because deep down inside, we know that was not our truth. And we've betrayed ourselves. We can fool everyone else around us. We can manipulate, except for ourselves. And when we tell untruths or we withhold truths, white lies even, they erode at our own ability to believe in ourselves. Because if you tell that person a thing you're not going to do, how can you believe anything you say to yourself about what you're going to achieve or who you want to become? You can't. So when people think that it's not a big deal to let these things slide, to understand the slippery slope that is.
Yeah. When people connect to the idea that if you've ever had a person in your life and they come to you for advice and they go, what should I do? My girlfriend, she's terrible. She keeps cheating on me. And you as the friend go, well, you should leave her. And they don't. And then they come back to you a month later for advice again. What should I do? I'm so unhappy. And you're like, leave her. And then a month later, again, same thing. You do that to yourself when you tell lies. You're literally signaling to your highest self that the whispers it's giving you of the way to exist in the world don't matter. And eventually your higher self gets kind of fucking sick of it and stops whispering. So when people are really in this space of, I don't know what my next step is, I don't know where I should go with my life, the simple advice is stop lying. Whether it's to other people, whether it's to yourself. And I say stop lying even before tell the truth. This is like one of the great pieces of wisdom I've heard from Jordan Peterson is it's not just tell the truth, because that's like a huge mountain for most people. It's just stop telling more lies right now. You don't need to immediately go tell your partner that it's all over, I never wanted to be with you, and it's blah, 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 blah. Or you don't need to go tell your mother, like, you ruined my life. Just start with stopping telling new lies. And then you can start to reforge that connection to your intuition, to your higher self that is waiting. It's excited to tell you some shit. It just wants to know you're listening.
Totally. It's such a beautiful reflection of even, throwing it back to the beginning of what happened today. It was like when you were on your way over, I was feeling all these feelings because I was thinking, okay, I feel like this is like the second time I've tried to meet up with Alex and I can't cancel on him. And I was feeling all this resistance internally. I was like, okay, Hal, pull yourself together. I really wanted to do a good job showcasing like what an amazing human being you are, but I've felt just super off and just all these stories, right? And my ego did not want to let you know that. I was like, all right, showtime. He's going to show up. We're going to do this. It's going to be perfect. And you walked in, you're like, yeah, something about, okay, and like perfect day for a podcast or something. And I was like, yeah, listen, I got to be clear. I'm feeling this. And within 10 seconds of admitting how I really felt, I was in tears. And in that process, in you holding space the way that you did, allowed those feelings to alchemize and move through. And it was beautifully connective. And then I felt, oh, actually, you know what? I am ready to do this podcast. Yeah, I'll just show up as me and how I'm feeling today. And that's perfectly fine too. So yeah, there's such a beauty in that. Just allowing. And I like what you said about not having to dive headfirst into it and run straight toward the truth. You can just glance in the direction of truth, to start there.
Absolutely.
So I do want to talk about psychedelics and psychedelic integration and all of this, because I feel like this has been a hot topic. For me personally, it's been popping up in connection with this theme about integrity and, also in the conscious community, because we're seeing this psychedelic renaissance happen, more and more people using these medicines to go back and unpack these traumas and to expand their consciousness. And yet, I feel strongly called, and I shared this with you, to discuss the shadow components of this psychedelic movement. I talk a lot about ayahuasca on my podcast, mushrooms on my podcast, and how profound the healing has been for people. But I think in order to balance that, I wanted to have a conversation with you about the seriousness of effectively using these tools and when it's not useful and who it's not for, and how we need to be discerning about how we integrate these things.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's such an important topic. And I find myself almost worried lately that I'm being a wet blanket, because it's so exciting. And I get that people are so jazzed about this novel thing that to so many people feels like coming home and feels like being connected to the source that they always wish they had had a connection to. But there are some really important things to know. So I can just tell a little bit of a story about a recent experience working with someone, and I'll anonymize the details so it's not clear. But this person that I was working with had sat in a ceremony with me and came out the other end of the ceremony and was just really feeling like unfinished, like there was an open loop. And we spoke a bit, and I just surfaced for this person that, some of the way that you were feeling sounds a little bit like a trauma response to me. Do you think there's anything just a little bit below the surface right now? And this person reflected to me a very deep and very dark trauma. I was like, oh, yeah. They're like, wow, I didn't realize that's what was coming to the surface. This person had about 2.5, 3 weeks of just emotionally so raw, just crying every day, not being able to just function, essentially. And I was available to help with regular check-ins and be present for it and help them work through this. But this story encapsulates a lot of what I want to talk about, because these compounds are so profound, but often forgotten is like, do you have space? Do you have support? Like these are, there's set and setting that most people know about. I like to add like 4 extra S's to that. It's like, it's set, it's setting, it's sitter, it's support. I had one other one too, but maybe it'll come to me. These are like just as important. Do you have support? Do you have space? That was the other one. After the experience, are you in a place where you could receive and work through things? Because one of the ways that I see these substances being used a little too cavalierly is just in not that acknowledging of the space aspect of it and the creating room for the experience to actually take root and to deepen and for you to see what it was actually all about. I facilitate, but I only tap in deeply 4 times a year for myself at like a deep personal journey level. And I think people often expect like, oh, so you must be like going in once a month or every, like every week. And no, because those big, profound experiences where you uncover deep truths about yourself need a lot of space to breathe. And planning ahead with that as you're planning a journey and just knowing, do you have the support? Like, whoever's facilitating, and that could be from, being realistic and pragmatic, that could be a friend, or it could be a well-trained facilitator, or it could be a straight up shaman, depending on what medicine you're doing. Mm. Do you know them? Do they have space to help you if something serious did surface? Are you willing to work on something serious if it did surface? Is this a good season of your life to confront this? Mm. Are there other things that maybe should be done first? What's the context in which you're taking the substance? If it's your first time trying mushrooms, it's probably a bad idea to take 5 grams at a bar. You may find yourself in some really, really sketchy territory, and the untalked about fact of psychedelics in general that I think touches on all these aspects is that they're an opening. They're this opening in this spotlight, and it creates this deeply profound malleability within your ability to reframe and repattern a story. But in that opening, you can repattern negatively too. Mm. If you have poor support, you're in a bad circumstance when you take the substance, it's just as easy to have a trauma resurface and re-traumatize yourself and find yourself with new fucked up coping behaviors. I've seen people have their first ayahuasca experience and they come back and they double down on their addictive behaviors because they weren't ready to confront what came up and there wasn't the proper support. And so now all of a sudden their addictions, it takes twice as much to like turn the awareness back off. Mm. So asking those questions, do you have space? Are you willing? Is the person you're going to sit with experienced or at least willing to be really with you in that time? If something does come up, it won't for everyone. Some people have these beautiful connective experiences, but you need to be open to the whole spectrum of experience that could surface. It's not just going to be like, I took 5 grams of mushrooms and God told me why I'm here on this earth. Mm. It would be nice if it was like that every time.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, it's like, hey, do you remember this happened when you were 6? Mm-hmm. You ready to work on that now?
Mm-hmm. Can you look at it? Yeah. Can you be with it? This conversation is so important. And I love what you're saying about space. And it's reminding me of something that I said in conversation a few weeks ago. This was actually at Aubrey's house. So I was with Aubrey and a couple of other people. And we were having this conversation about the importance of space in between psychedelic experiences. Aubrey was sharing some really powerful stories about times in his life where the medicine was used more like a drug, not a medicine. He actually ended up writing a really beautiful newsletter, which I'm sure a lot of people listening to this actually read, kind of out of that conversation a few days after. And my feelings on the space were twofold. One metaphor I like is, there's this quote I love. I don't remember it exactly, but it talks about how what makes a piece of music beautiful is the space. It's the pause, it's the tension in between the notes. Because without the space, without the rest, it's just a bunch of things on top of each other. It's just a bunch of noise. Mm-hmm. We need that space. And relationships are like that too. I was thinking about, and I said this in the conversation too, about the immediacy of communication, texting, right? Getting to know someone new. There's this expectation of back and forth. Oh, I can see they've read my message. They've watched my Instagram story.
They must hate me.
Right? None of this happened back when we were writing poetic love letters to each other, and they had to wait for it to be delivered, and you would stare out the window in longing to hear from that person, and that desire could grow in your heart for that, and that reverence for that relationship. Our relationship with plant medicines, in my opinion, should be the same. That deep reverence, that love that has a chance to grow and to breathe. And so I'm so happy to hear you talk about you as someone who works so regularly with the medicine and holding space is like, no, I'm actually only doing these big journeys for myself quarterly, and I'm really honoring them.
Yeah, and even quarterly, that's a cadence that I think I sustain as a facilitator to keep my vessel clear and to make sure I'm not bringing anything into other people's experiences. But something I tell people often when they work with me or with anyone is sometimes for people's first 2 years, let's say, you may have a fairly regular cadence. So that may be 4 times a year or something, 4 big experiences, because you're uncovering big traumas that you weren't aware of, and you're working through them. Things are progressing. But for most people, unless working with psychedelics specifically is your life calling, actually a more once a year check-in might be okay, or once every other year. And there's I've caught myself in this pattern of almost overdoing it, because I'm sure there must be another thing wrong that I need to fix in myself, without just acknowledging oh no, I just need to go do the thing. I need to go do the work. So it's being aware of that too, of just once you feel as if you've processed quite a few of your capital T traumas, give some space. And is your life outside of ceremony continuing to improve? That's the question someone should be asking themselves, no matter their capacity. Are things getting better outside of ceremony each time? Or is it I need to go to ceremony because that's my brief 6-12 hours where I get to feel like I'm alive? It's this shouldn't be your only joyride into the connection of the universe. That should be naturally flourishing on its own from the seeds that are planted in the ceremony.
That's such a good point. And you reminded me of something I want to offer on that note, because so when we're in the experience of experiencing the feeling that we will say resonate with, so it's joy or it's bliss, and this can happen in the medicine space, is we have the recognition of, oh, it feels so good to feel this feeling. I haven't felt this way in so long. And then a thought creeps in, oh, why don't I feel this way? Or, oh, I don't want to lose this feeling. And then our vibration drops off, right? And we get into a negative spiral about how our life is not that way. When just a moment ago, we were on that radio frequency, that high frequency. So how to stay on that high frequency. And this can be when you're on medicine or not, when you're just going throughout your day and you notice how beautiful the clouds are and you have an accidental moment of gratitude, consciously stopping and rehearsing what that feeling feels like. And what do I mean when I say that? I mean pausing to slow down and tune in with the breath in the middle of the experience, asking, how do my cells feel in my body? Do they feel lit up? What's the relationship between my breath and my heart rate at this moment? Can I entrain myself with the expansiveness of this beingness that I am currently in the nowness of? And so in the work that I was doing with ayahuasca, when I would notice myself in a feeling pocket of vibration that I quite enjoyed, I would say, okay, rehearse this cellularly. What does this feel like? How does this Hallie be? How does she breathe? Where is the energy? How is it flowing throughout my body? And there was almost a sense of fractal geometry with that. So it was like I was looking at patterns that you'd follow to make something. It's like, okay, this is the blueprint for this experience of joy. Let me embody that and try that on fully. So I want to offer that as a tool for people. It might seem a little out there for some, but basically the crux of it is there's research that shows that when we can hold a feeling of gratitude for, I think it's like 20 seconds or something like that, we bring it from just that working memory more into the short term. And the more often we bring things from working into the short term memory, they can then go into long term memory as new behavioral patterns.
Yeah.
So just catching ourselves in the moment of gratitude or actively trying to elicit those feelings of gratitude through like a gratitude practice, even when you don't feel it.
Yeah. And I think the access point that I find so useful is one of joy and laughter, because I find gratitude can be hard to access in moments where you're really deep in the suck.
True.
But I can access joy and laughter even in the suck just through, God, this fucking sucks.
Yeah.
God damn, this is shitty.
Totally.
Holy fuck. I actually am in awe that so many things could go wrong at once.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yes.
So just bringing that in as something I give people before a ceremony is like, look, sometimes you're fucking in it and it's like difficulty after difficulty. Bring joy in that moment too. Bring laughter and playfulness in that moment too. And remind yourself that, yeah, it can be difficult, but you're the one that chooses the frame in which you're viewing the difficulty.
Totally. I was speaking with someone this morning, a friend on the phone who's going through quite a difficult time in a divorce, and it's really messy, and there's a business involved, and there's a court case and restraining orders and all of this just horrible stuff, and just deep in his pain with it. And having touched those moments, I'm sure most of us have actually, of just absolute rock bottom, dark night of the soul, don't want to be here anymore. You know, what do you do? And I told him that the gift of the pain is it deepens our capacity for all feeling compassion for others. Because when you stroke the bottom of that darkness and somebody next to you turns to you with their pain, you look in their eyes and you're like, I see you. And they know that you really do see them. They can see in your eyes that you have danced with that pain. Now, when you're in the experience of experiencing the pain and it fucking sucks, like you're saying, it's really hard to come with that gratitude. But that's what I was offering is like, I've said this before on the podcast. It's one of my favorite quotes. The heart cannot be broken. Only the walls of the heart can be broken. So there's this idea that in the allowing of the pain, we're deepening our capacity to be a love warrior on this planet. And what a gift is that?
Absolutely.
And if I cut myself off from these more difficult feelings, then I'm cutting myself off from a new threshold of joy that I'm able to experience. And again, that famous, Ram Dass quote, he goes, I love my pain. I love my wheelchair. I mean, that's it. It's all part of the human experience. And to cut yourself off or try to control, I only want these feelings as part of the spectrum of my experience, you are effectively cutting yourself off from all these other delicious aspects that will round you out as soul.
Yeah. And for just like those who may be emotionally closed off, hi, it's me, guilty often. I'm sure many of us can relate to that. Pain is, whether it's emotional pain or even physical pain, is the sharp, skinny end of the wedge that opens the cracks of the walls around your heart. And just acknowledging it in that capacity helps contextualize it a little bit, because oftentimes we're not able to let joy in, we're not able to let love in from someone else, but sometimes that deep pain, like a parent, passes, and that's the thing that cracks you open. And just being with that, as you're saying, and allowing that to be the first piece that kind of like tears away a little bit of the wall, because it's like, it's so sharp. It's a very sharp emotion is how I feel it and experiencing it. And that's helped me a lot in just thinking about it in that way of, okay, this is a really, really, really powerful tool that's going to help me open up to everything else.
I want to ask you, asking for a friend, of course, what do we do when we're in a period of deeply desiring to connect with our emotions, but feeling cut off? And I get this often with myself. And then people that I work with, it's like, I'll ask them, so how are you feeling right now? I don't know. And like for me this week, I've felt this desire to cry, like at the surface. And I've been saying like, it's okay. You can cry. I want to cry. And it's just like not really coming. I'm like drinking cacao to open my heart and like saging my heart and like spraying rose water on myself. And the energy just is feeling really stuck. So what are your tools for people listening who know that there's stuff just agitated at the surface and it doesn't feel safe for them to release that yet?
Yeah. I mean, I just think you look at what we did today as a pattern. The minute you're in relation with someone who is ready to receive, immediately you're in and you're able to process and pass through. Humans are social creatures. Our emotions are a evolutionary construct meant to allow us to relate to each other better, to optimize our existence and our survival. Our emotions are not meant to be experienced in isolation, even though that's the Western paradigm is, go cry by yourself in your room because something hurts. I had this really beautiful experience recently where someone who had lost their mother like days before, myself and 5 other people were sitting and holding that space for this person and just had a hand on her back and just held her as she cried through it. And like, you could feel it. And like, for all of us sitting around, I talked to someone about this afterwards. Like, it felt weirdly right, which is a weird feeling to feel as like someone's like deeply crying about the death of a loved one. But all of us were like, that like clicked. That was a puzzle piece right where it was supposed to be to complete a picture of how this was supposed to be processed. But so many of us try to process our emotions completely in isolation. Like, it's beautiful to try and gain clarity on your emotions in isolation. But I really firmly believe that most emotions are meant to be processed relationally. And a part of that's purely a function of how often when you're thinking through something that you're feeling, do you speak it out loud? Like, literally giving it words and structure and form and bounds rather than just bouncing around in your head. Like, I don't know what this is. Like, how often do you speak, I'm feeling sad right now because I don't know that I'm enough. I don't know that I'm showing up in the way that I wish I was. And when you speak that, it has form. And that form can allow the emotion to process and can allow it to actually pass through us. And that's best done with someone. You can do it on your own. Journaling is a good tool for that. But oftentimes it takes that person who's willing to hold space and who will just push a little bit and go, why are you feeling that? The questions we probably know we should ask ourselves, but don't really want to. So to that person who's knows they have emotions that are pent up and they're having trouble processing them, finding someone who can hold that space. And that could be a therapist. It could be a coach. That could be a lot of things. It could be
Alex Nelson.
It could be me. Or it could just be a friend.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I think the last thing I'm thinking about is wanting to offer people more tools, because I know this path of spiritual awakening can be such an isolating one. I find I go through cycles of that where I'm like, I have such a big community. I have so much support. There's all these light workers. Look at the cool things we're doing. And then I'm like, I'm all alone in this work. I'm all alone in this work. And just like watching myself go through those cycles is quite hilarious. But one resource is you, and at the end, I'll get you to offer where people can find you. Another is I want to offer my friend Kyle Buller, who is the founder of Setting Sun Wellness. He does breath work. He's really into the Stanislav Grof stuff. And he's also the co-founder of Psychedelics Today. He offered me a course earlier in the year when I was going through a definite period of psychospiritual emergency. And he gifted that course to me, and I have since recommended it to multiple people who have reached out to me for coaching or something like that. And I go, you know what? Actually, I think this might be the direction for you. So I'll make sure that I link to that in the show notes, where people can find his psychospiritual emergency course. Super, super helpful. But and in a minute, I'll throw it over to you if you have any additional resources for that. But because again, therapy personally really failed me because it didn't meet me spiritually where I was at. Psychologically, I could understand what they were trying to do, but it left something to be desired. And I think that that's quite common across people who are going through their spiritual awakenings is like, okay, there's plant medicine, but I'm waking up fast. I can't ground in all of this. Where do I go? And just to add a little flavor of a story from my life before throwing it over to you is the first time that I went and I drank ayahuasca, my first 4 ceremonies, super powerful, became a different version of myself. Brand new. I've never really gone back to a lot of those behavior patterns. And obviously, the podcast and all the work that I'm doing actually came out of those first 4 ceremonies. And I'll have to say, I integrated those real well. Like I had a plan. After every single one of my ceremonies, did a long voice note recording of all the lessons that I had learned. And I didn't wait till the next day. I actually did it the night of. And some of these voice note recordings, which maybe I'll share someday on the podcast, I'm still slurring my words because I'm on ayahuasca, but it was so important that I captured the vibration of it in its purity. And so then part of my integration plan was to listen back to all of those recordings. Some of them were 40, 50 minutes long, processing after my journeys. And I took down bullet point notes of what the tools, what the reminders were that I personally needed to do. And then I came up with an integration plan, and it had everything from a list of friends that I wanted to be more active about touching in with on a monthly basis. What were the habits and routines I needed to put back into place? What was the diet that was delivered to me in those ceremonies, and how was I going to implement it? And I went and I did it. And I really was strong in that. And a lot of what I'm doing now was birthed out of that phase where I was really, really good about that. Now, the second time, and I don't think I've ever really talked about this yet on the podcast, which would have me leaving the center in January of 2020. So right before, COVID rained down on the world and everything. I had a really nice idea of what I was going to do for integration, which was to travel around Costa Rica with my boyfriend at the time. And we had both sat with the medicine, and we were going to be in paradise together, in love, having fun, resting. Our relationship ended about 7 days after we left the center. In an unknown part of Costa Rica, feeling rather unsafe, having no accommodations booked, having 3 weeks ahead that was supposed to be our time together, and now trying to coordinate different flights out of the country. And so with having done 13 ayahuasca ceremonies last year, and really with all the best of intentions, having this integration plan, it just did not go the way that I wanted it to. And I want to tell this story a little bit because I want people to know that, well, one, sometimes the plan doesn't work out. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but it's important to have a plan. And I think it's important for me to share this because I don't want people to have the wrong idea of how glorious all of this is. So what I want to say about that is, and again, I shared this story with a friend at Aubrey's a few weeks ago. And I was like, I need to talk about this more. My experience after leaving Costa Rica the second time was I went so deep into the layers of myself that when I came back, I was unsettled by my lack of complete attachment to anything. I had surrendered so much attachment to who I was or why I was supposed to be here. People talk about letting go of the ego. Oh yeah, great. Destroy the ego. Without the ego, it's very hard to orient in this dimension. You're not really sure why you're here. And I found myself in a hotel room in not the safest part of Costa Rica with a long sleeve t-shirt wrapped around my head, tied around my crown, because I had had the experience of having my crown chakra blown open in ceremony a few days before, and spent several days with this sensation that my energy was touching the walls, right? And then on top of that, having the awareness that I'm having the perception that my energy is touching the walls. It's very weird. And you go, okay, the thoughts that I'm thinking right now are insane.
Yeah.
So what happened was blew the crown chakra open. One of the healers at the center actually gave me a special flower bath for my crown and tried to put my energy back in because I just had the most excruciating headache the next day. And then 3-4 days later, after it opened, what goes up must come down. It started to cave in. So I had this feeling of almost like sand going through an hourglass. Like that was how it felt in the center of my head. Just a sinking gravity, nauseating, going down an elevator too fast or a roller coaster, sort of actual physical sensation. So ungrounded, very scary. The writings, which I will share someday from that pocket that week in February of 2020, are me questioning my own sanity. And it's funny because I was still like doing the podcast like that. I remember that was one of the weeks that I released the Dorian Yates episode. I remember recording the intro for that and just being like, I feel absolutely crazy, like half here, half not, like I'm dreaming. And it was terrifying. I remember thinking, how can I get help? Who can help me through this? Who can I even explain this to? I worked with several spiritual healers, energy workers. I was calling people at medicine centers in Peru saying, what do I do about this? Do I need a soul retrieval? You know, like I'm going through this whole terrifying list and feeling hollow, just feeling completely unsure of what I was doing. So I want to offer that because that actually lasted, to some degree, 8 months. I've only started to feel back in the human body, ego, in fullness and with a vengeance, which is interesting. The pendulum swings. So it was very scary to feel completely dissolved from my ego. I remember sitting in the hotel room and having the experience of my mom calling me and letting her know how afraid I was and her talking and me feeling like I was in a cartoon or something. Just the experience. I felt so separate from it. And there was a part of me that was watching and going, oh, okay, yep. So this is your mom. Your mom is Karen. So your dad is Rob. So, okay, so we are in this layer. Like this is real, or this is at least like where we are. It felt as real as any dream. So you know how sometimes you have like a dream and you're like, yeah, in this dream it was my parents, but they were different. Or I was at my school or at my old house, but it was different. It was like that. Being awake, being alive was like, something's off here. Can't quite sense what it is. Terrifying experience to have. And then you mount having a breakup with like your self-professed twin flame that same week. I mean, it really destroyed me. And then 1 week later, I flew back to the States and COVID happened and we went into lockdown. I was like, did I break the universe? Like, seriously. So I think it's important to share this because when people listen to podcasts, when people listen to people that they look up to, they go, God, they have it all together. I want to be the one that says, no, my friend. No, my friend. And it has been a messy, long road, and it continues to be. And it is my promise to continue to walk that with as much grace and vulnerability and integrity as I possibly can. And it feels like a duty to share this piece with everyone here now.
It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. The image, and this may or may not be helpful for people listening, but might be helpful for you to just conceptualize your experience is that of a volcano, and the volcano erupts right out of the top and everything caves in. And there's a crater left behind after the eruption, and all of the particulate from the volcano is up in the atmosphere and it creates clouds. This feeling of deep ungroundedness and of just being in the atmosphere and of being empty almost and just carefree and nothing matters. It takes time for those clouds to congeal, to take form again, and then to rain. And when they do rain back down with that water, that healing element into the crater, sometimes a lake forms. And sometimes that lake allows abundant new life to spring forward.
I love that, Alex, because, and I think this is a great way to round out, but this is another thing I've been talking about recently is cycles. So the whole thing with the volcano and the precipitation, it's the metaphor I've been using when people are talking about being in a pocket of pain. I'm like, okay, well, everything moves in seasons, right? So right now you're in the winter and you can, one, just be in winter and go, oh, look, it's winter. There's the snow. It's cold outside. Cool. I can enjoy this. I can love this. Or you can go, oh my God, it's winter. I don't like winter. I can never get warm enough. I got to shovel the snow. I hate this. Oh, I want to be somewhere else. Right? And guess what winter's going to do? Still going to fucking be there. Winter's not going anywhere. It's just your perception of winter. So if you can allow that, I think it comes from a fear of it's not going to move, right? If I really open to this feeling of winter or the dark night of my soul, oh my gosh, it's going to stay forever, which is just a story.
Yeah.
It's an illusion. So if we can create a safe container for us to experience winter emotion, it can be like a ritual. So you say, I'm going to go sit on my cushion in front of this little corner, this little altar I've created. And I'm going to let whatever comes up need to come up for 5 minutes. This is a safe space to feel. Maybe it's frustration, anger, you're feeling judgmental of others. You're just, it's just ugly inside. Yeah. Let it be there for 5 minutes. That way you don't have to go around your whole day feeling it all the time, pretending like you're not feeling it. You can just feel it and move on. It's kind of like Julia Cameron's, The Artist's Way in her morning pages. She says, just write 3 pages, get it all out.
Don't fucking look at it.
Don't edit it. It's your mental purge. just do it and allow yourself that, give yourself that gift, and then allow the seasons to be what they will.
Yeah. It speaks so much to the integration piece too, which, even in the sharing of your experience, it's so important for people to hear just that. You need to is a funny word. You're invited to create structures around your experience that will allow for it to deepen in whichever way it needs to deepen. And it's part of the reason I often recommend to people that they work with a slow progression of medicines, from perhaps microdosing as a beautiful first way to get acquainted and kind of get your head above the water, to perhaps a low dose psilocybin journey. Maybe if someone has specific PTSD, then an MDMA assisted therapy session, and slowly escalating up to the big 14 ceremony sprints. Because at each step of the way, it's almost like your physical body and your ego self needs to do catch up.
Totally.
To create the systems that are going to allow fertile ground for the next seeds that are going to get planted in the next ceremony to actually grow. Right.
And to be honest with ourselves too, like, I think that my experience happened the way that it needed to happen because I was being called to some higher things and had some mad resistance and still do. And you and I were talking about that, but that's why that needed to happen for me. And yet I do want to say, I don't recommend people go do 13 ayahuasca ceremonies in 1 year. And I do want to say that I've been training for that in my own way since I was 9 years old. Yeah. And I had my first shamanic, soul travel journey, leaving my body. So, and then the meditation and all the readings and the education from my parents, that primed me to go to a certain level and to have some of the tools to navigate. Without that, I would have been in some real hot water. Yeah. I had access to getting a soul retrieval via Zoom with a Lakota shaman who basically raised me. She was the one that actually did my first journey at 9, right? And so I had access to these tools. I don't recommend that that everyone just dive straight into that. And I want to be clear about how important it is to come to these things with reverence. And if you feel the need to dive into medicines, just being clear about why. And do I want to just say that I was able to do this many journeys or take this many grams so that I can say
I've done all these different medicines.
Because you know what? It's like some of the most rooted, grounded, evolved beings I've ever met, some of them have not even done psychedelics. And or very limited. Like I remember we just talked about Kyle Buller from Psychedelics today. You would assume that this dude has done so many psychedelic journeys. Guess what? He really hasn't, in comparison to a lot of people in this sphere. Because why? Because this young man had a near-death experience at 16 years old. He tells this incredible story on this podcast. Shameless plug. But that experience taught him what takes a lot of psychedelic experiences to learn. And that was his first time doing ayahuasca. Only this past year. So I just want to say that there are other ways to grow, and to check in, like you said, check in with yourself.
What, perhaps as a parting thought, something that comes to me often, and I like to use to reframe people, is everything happens for a reason is a really, really, really good way to reflect upon things that have already happened. Because it puts your brain into the mode of analyzing how could this benefit me going forward. It is a terrible strategy to project into the future what you're going to do. And oftentimes in the spiritual community, I hear that phrase being thrown around. Like everything happens for a reason. So I'm just going to go to Peru tomorrow, the center that I haven't researched, and just do ayahuasca. It's like, okay. I mean, hopefully the reason's not that you're supposed to die and return to the astral soup, because that would suck if that was the reason. And are you sure that's what you're choosing?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a beautiful reflection to look upon the experiences you've had and go, what could be the reason this happened? But also as you're planning forward, like to use that prudence and to go, okay, am I really prepared for this? Is this something I am willing to welcome in fully in the full spectrum of possibilities that avail me? Because if I'm not, then I'm not ready.
And it's okay to be not ready. There's something so powerful in knowing where you're at and just loving that. Yeah, just loving that. I always tell people who are making the decision to work with me, before we get off the phone, I always say, I want you to decide what's right for you. You know within your soul what's right for you. And listen to the reasons that come up in your head why you should or shouldn't. Like, let's unpack those together. And ultimately, it doesn't matter to me what you choose at the end of this. I want what's in highest service to you. So just to get to a point of either a hell yes or a clear no for now. Because if you stay in a space of like, I'm not sure, in between, and this goes with medicines too, it disempowers ourselves. So just to choose your yes or to choose your no and feel great about even choosing a no.
Yeah, it gives you the feedback process doesn't start until you make a decision. And when you make the decision, after tuning into yourself, then you can start to gather data of if that was the right decision or not. And the faster that process happens, the quicker you can get data and update your plan and go, ooh, okay, I know I told Hallie that we weren't going to work together, but I guess that was wrong. I need to go back to her and tell her, yeah, we actually do need to work together. I just was a little scared.
Totally. Right. So when you look at it that way, it's kind of beautiful because, like you said, there really is no wrong choice. It's all feedback. So we choose a thing, we sit with the feeling that comes up in our gut, in our heart, in our throat. Oh, this feeling makes me feel contracted. This feeling actually makes me feel expansive. These are all signposts on the road of, am I on the aligned path of the person that I'm becoming for the highest good of myself and all of mankind?
Yeah, beautiful.
Alex Nelson, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. As we wrap up, will you tell people who are interested in finding you, doing some of your online stuff, or potentially coaching with you, where they can find you, maybe your Instagram handle?
Absolutely. Yeah. So hilariously, I consider myself to be the worst businessman of all time because even as you're reflecting, something I tell my clients often is like, my ideal circumstance is you work with me like 3 times and then you're fucking sorted and you don't need to come back.
Yeah.
Which is terrible business, but good for what I'm trying to accomplish on a large scale. You can find most of my stuff at my website, which is www.throughtheveil.co, not .com. And that can lead you to the podcast, that can lead you to my coaching, etc., booking, psychedelic integration, all the above. You can also find me on Instagram at Alexander Diesel. That is where I post most of my content. You can drop me a DM and I may or may not respond. Who knows? Usually I'm pretty good, but sometimes not. So don't take any personal offense.
Love the boundaries there, Alex.
Don't take any personal offense if I don't respond. I still love you, but I may leave you unseen. So yeah, those are the best 2 places to find me. You can check out my podcast, Through the Veil, on which Hallie has been featured twice and is a wonderful guest to listen to and get to know a little bit more if you like to hear her in the sort of interviewee role.
You're a great interviewer too. I have to say that. Like, your podcast is one of my favorite ones to be on. And yeah, maybe I'll have to get you interviewing me on my show. I've been wanting to do that for a while, is getting someone to help me tell my story. So that would be cool.
Really cool idea.
Yeah. Awesome, Alex. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me on.